Welcome to another episode of Compare the Pair, the series where we look at two games and look at the strengths and weaknesses of each to help answer the ultimate question, which one was better? Today we have two games that need no introduction. The first title we have is the original Doom, releasing in 1993 for DOS-based computers by developer id Software, the same creative outfit which brought us the Commander Keen series and Wolfenstein 3D years earlier. Honestly, I could populate an entire YouTube channel with id Software content. They have helped move gaming forward so many times and deserve all of the praise they receive. Like many games at the time, Doom was released as a shareware title, which, interestingly enough, contained the entire first episode of the game, a whopping 9 levels, with the remainder of the game, being episodes 2 and 3, requiring the purchase of the full version. Now, there was an additional episode released as part of the Ultimate Doom pack in 1995, which included a further set of levels, but for most people it was the vanilla Doom game they remember playing, at least back in the 90s. Story-wise, you're an unnamed Marine who's sent to one of Mars's moons to investigate a call for immediate military help. When you arrive, you secure the perimeter while your buddies go inside, only they never come back and you can't reach them on the radio. So what do? The only logical thing, of course, go in armed only with a pistol. It's a story that is told well, not just by the text dump in the manual, but by the environmental storytelling, which I'll go into more detail later on. Now, growing up, I only had access to the shareware version of Doom, and I didn't actually finish the full version of Doom till much later on. In fact, I actually finished Doom 64 before I completed the original Doom, taking note that these are both quite different Doom experiences. The second title we're going to be comparing is Doom's direct sequel, Doom 2 Hell on Earth. Yeah, no points for guessing where the story goes here. Releasing just 1 year later in 1994, and side note, I was going to make a joke here about how we would never get a franchise with a 1 year development time in modern times. Then I remembered Call of Duty, so you know what? Never mind. As I was saying, with a release date of only 1 year after the initial game, Doom 2 sees the story pivot to the unnamed Marine returning to Earth only to find out that it's been overrun by the forces of Hell, with your journey to save Earth taking you everywhere from the Earth's surface to back to Hell and everywhere in between. Now, quick note, I'm playing the Bethesda modernised versions of these games, which feature largely the same games as the original, just much better optimised for modern PCs, in particular widescreen resolutions. There's also a few quality of life updates such as better weapon scrolling. Before we continue, a massive thank you to everyone who supports the channel. If you enjoy this type of content, please do consider subscribing. It helps support the channel and you can be notified of new content the moment it drops. With that out of the way, let's grab our pistol, turn invisible, and head back to the early 90s to compare the pair. Now, if there was some type of magical ledger that tracked how many times I'd purchased the same game, Doom would probably be at the top of that list. Not only have I purchased the original Doom on 3.5-inch floppies, but I've also purchased it on CD and much later on PlayStation 1, not to mention repurchasing it again on Steam decades later. The thing is, while likely spending a king's ransom on purchases of Doom, I've never regretted it once because it's just such a fun game that has aged far better than it deserves to, even when looking at the very original versions of the game. There's a reason the phrase Doom clone exists, and that's because many of the 3D first-person shooters that came after Doom drew heavy inspirations from Doom. The status bar, the control, the weapon systems, the level design, even the enemies fighting between each other, not to mention the amazing soundtrack, were all elements that many other games borrowed in the years to come. Heck, we even got that questionable movie in 2005, which is effectively based on the original Doom. Quick side note, while I was writing the script for this video, I thought, what better way to put myself in a Doom mood than to put on that movie? So I searched online which service streamed it. Amazon Video, great, I have this. I fire up Amazon Video and find out that it's not included in the regular subscription like almost every other movie, but paywalled behind a $5 rental system. $5 on top of my subscription to watch one of the worst movies I ever saw in the cinema. They should be paying me the $5. Anyway, the point is that Doom defined a genre. A big part of the immersion of this game comes from the visual storytelling. Everything from the locations and beautifully detailed overworld map to the ambience of seeing other slain Marines lying on the floor as you traverse the level. It helps the game tell its story. A story which also flows quite well from episode to episode. with a good sense of a start, middle and end within each episode. Another massive step that Doom took was in the many themes that the levels delivered, with dramatically varied aesthetics which kept each level and indeed each episode feeling fresh. If you look at episode 1 and compare it to episode 3, you'd be forgiven for thinking you were playing a different game, because they are just so varied. This is a good thing, and in part why I think the game has held up all of these years. Of course, combat is the star of the show in Doom, and the evolution from rather static shooting in Wolfenstein 3D is replaced with a much more mobile experience, complete with enemy projectiles and melee attacks. But don't worry, you have a fairly varied arsenal of your own to deal with these threats, which thankfully, for most of the weapons, you unlock relatively quickly in each episode. There's not really a bad weapon here, with each one having unique traits suiting it to a particular type of combat. Sound design was another strong point of Doom, with an energetic, almost trance-like soundtrack supporting the game's sound effects. It was really good stuff and scaled well depending on your sound card back during its original release. As far as things which I don't think worked as well in Doom, there aren't many. It's an excellent game and it's won more awards than I can count and is still selling copies on virtually every platform today. But about the only criticism I can level at Doom is that some of its levels can be too complex for their own good and feel like mazes as opposed to levels. It doesn't happen often, but there are certainly maps that you will experience this in. The other is the lack of jumping, and it's probably less the lack that you can jump and more the fact that there are some sections of levels where you have a keycard on a pedestal at chest height to you, but you can't collect it until you lower the pedestal. I think that there could have been a little bit more work done here to de-emphasize the lack of jumping in this scenario, rather than highlighting it as is the case in these sections. Now, of course, with the critical success that Doom enjoyed, we didn't have to wait long for a sequel, and we got that in 1994 with Doom 2 Hell on Earth. Now, the first thing you will have noticed is that on the surface, graphically the games look very similar. The overall game engine looks to be the same, but where Doom 2 changes things up is in the scale of its level geometry. Comparing the maps between the two titles, Doom 2 features much larger open space areas with much more verticality. The downtown level is a very good example of this. The challenge with the verticality is the lack of precise aiming or the ability to look up or down creates some frustration when dealing with some of the game's more powerful enemies who are above you. You need to just fire your weapon and hope that the auto-aim locks onto them, not exactly precise. There are also segments in the larger levels where you'll be walking from point A to point B with very little in the way of interaction, which doesn't help keep the player engaged. However, one of the good things that Doom 2 does is it presents levels in an order which reduces fatigue from these large open areas, of which there are many. You might have one large level, then a medium-sized level, and then a small-sized level. This is a minor thing, but it really pays dividends in making you want to keep playing. But perhaps the largest change in Doom 2 comes from the overall pacing of the game. Doom 1 felt like it led with exploration and brought combat second. After all, the levels were very immersive and encouraged exploration. However, Doom 2 tends to lead with combat first and exploration second. Now, how does this actually translate to the game? Well, for a start, there are a lot more enemies in each level in Doom 2. I'd comfortably say double, if not triple the enemy count of the original title. There's also a lot more ammo and power-ups to ensure the game can make this combat-first approach enjoyable. After all, it's hard to have fun mowing down enemies if you're worried about conserving ammo. Travelling to the future briefly, Doom 1 feels a lot like Doom 3, more horror-focused, where Doom 2 feels like the Doom reboot of 2016, which delivered a much faster-paced game. One of the things that I was disappointed in was the lack of changes to the weapon roster in Doom 2. Yes, you get the double-barreled shotgun, which is very satisfying to use, but that's it. All of the other weapons are just verbatim carried over from the original Doom, and I think this is a missed opportunity. With a different location, there could have been an easy narrative reason to find different weapons. Alas, we are constrained just to the double-barreled shotgun. Then there's the game's length, with Doom 2 clocking in at a few hours longer than the original Doom. However, objectively, one of the reasons for this is due to the traversal across large distances in some of the levels with very little to do. The factory level is a really good example of this. But one of the things Doom 2 does well is improve upon the keycard fetch quests of the original, with there now being more of a puzzle approach as opposed to a simple collect and unlock approach. It's nothing to the extent of later titles like Dark Forces, but you can certainly tell some work was done here to create a bit more of a challenge for the player. Unfortunately, like the original, you still can't jump, which is as frustrating as it was in the original. There's probably a good technical reason for this, given they use the same game engine, but I feel like the game could have been greatly enhanced if it did include a jump mechanic. One thing they did ramp up was the amount of levels featuring teleporters. And look, I didn't mind it in Doom 1 because it was used sparingly, but in Doom 2 it's used a little too frequently for my liking, with some levels becoming quite confusing to navigate owing to the need of remembering where each teleporter goes. Sound design is virtually identical to Doom 1, with Doom 2 also sounding great. Now, Doom 1 and 2 are both great games that in modern times still hold up remarkably well and are a lot of fun to play. When people often think of Doom though, they think of the original, and broadly speaking, you don't see too many people talking about Doom 2. One of the reasons may have been that during its initial release in the 90s, Doom 2 didn't have a shareware version like the original had, so if you wanted to play it, you had to put down your cold hard cash up front. And I do wonder in hindsight if they didn't include a shareware version simply because the shareware version of Doom 1 gave you a pretty accurate expectation of what to expect in Doom 2 also. Regardless of having a shareware version or not, Doom 2 was reviewed favourably, but not to the same extent as the original. For me, when asking which was the better version, a lot of it comes down to the experience you want to have. For a horror-focused experience, it's probably Doom 1, and for a more action-packed experience, it's probably Doom 2. But then there's the things that can't be ignored, like the lack of any meaningful cosmetic changes outside of level geometry, lack of more new weapons, and still that lack of a jump mechanic. And with that, I'm going to say that I feel the better game was Doom 1. Doom 1 was a pioneer when it was released, and it was always going to be challenging to follow it up and deliver another pioneering experience. Perhaps the short time between release of these titles hampered the time for the team to deliver a more enhanced experience, or perhaps the team felt that their audience just wanted more of the same. Regardless, as I said before, both are great games, and I'd encourage anyone who is a fan of first-person shooters to play them both. But that's enough from me. Do you agree or disagree with my opinions? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.